There is a truth most people never learn until life forces it into them painfully. You will never be universally liked. And the moment you start living for approval, you start losing power. Machiavelli understood this better than almost anyone in history. He didn't write for comfort. He wrote for survival, for control, for reality. In The Prince, he states a truth that sounds cold but is undeniable. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But what most people miss is not the word feared. It is the logic behind it. Because Machiavelli was not telling you to become cruel. He was telling you to stop becoming dependent on opinions, dependent on approval, dependent on being accepted by people who would replace you without hesitation. The world does not reward emotional attachment to perception. It rewards strength, clarity, and strategy. And yet most people live like prisoners of judgment. They hesitate before speaking. They edit their dreams so others won't feel uncomfortable. They shrink their ambition just to avoid criticism. Machiavelli would call this the beginning of weakness. He wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. But in modern life, the ruler is you. And the question becomes, who are you letting rule your mind? Because every time you ask, what will they think of me? You are handing your authority away." Machiavelli didn't believe in living safely inside the opinions of others. He believed in outcomes. He observed something dangerous about human nature. People praise you in good times and abandon you in difficult ones. He writes, "Men change their rulers willingly, hoping for the better. That means loyalty is temporary, respect is conditional, and admiration is fragile. So if you build your identity on what others think, you are building on sand during a storm. The brutal truth is this. The moment you start trying to be liked by everyone, you become powerful to no one, because power requires direction, and direction requires independence. Machiavelli teaches that appearances matter, but not approval. He says, everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are, so the world judges the surface. But victory is built underneath it. This is where most people fail. They confuse attention with authority. They confuse popularity with strength. But Machiavelli separates them completely. He would tell you, let them misunderstand you. Let them judge early. Let them talk while you build. Because time always exposes reality. And here's the most uncomfortable part. If you need everyone to like you, you will never be free. You will constantly adjust yourself like a mask in front of different crowds. And Machiavelli had no patience for masks worn out of fear. He believed in controlled appearance, not emotional dependency. There is a difference between strategy and insecurity. Strategy says, I know what I am doing. Insecurity says, I hope they accept what I am doing. One builds power. The other leaks it. Machiavelli's world was not soft, and neither is reality. People respect strength more than agreement. They follow certainty more than friendliness. And they remember impact more than intention. So when you stop caring what they think, you are not becoming careless. You are becoming clear. Clear about your direction. Clear about your priorities. Clear about your own authority. But there is a deeper layer Machiavelli warns about, one most people never reach. Because once you stop caring about approval, you will face something else, resistance. Not everyone will understand your change. Some will challenge it. Some will test it. Some will try to pull you back into your old version. And this is where many people collapse. They mistake resistance for proof they are wrong. But Machiavelli would say the opposite. Resistance often appears when power begins to form. And if you survive that stage, something shifts. You stop reacting to opinions. You stop negotiating your identity. You stop living inside other people's expectations. And for the first time, you begin to move strategically through life. You begin to understand that silence is sometimes stronger than explanation. That distance is sometimes more powerful than argument. And that consistency destroys criticism over time more effectively than defense ever could. But this is not the end of the lesson. Because Machiavelli also warns, power without awareness becomes self-destruction. He understood that men who rise too quickly without control of perception eventually attract enemies they never prepared for. And there is a line between confidence and arrogance, between independence and isolation, between strength and blindness. And understanding that line is where true mastery begins. Because once you stop caring what they think, the real challenge is not becoming free from others. It is becoming disciplined with yourself, to act with intention, not emotion, to move with strategy, not impulse, to build quietly while others debate loudly. But to understand that fully, you must first understand something darker. Why people really judge you, why they try to control perception, and why even the strongest minds still fall into the trap of approval. The moment you stop caring what people think, something uncomfortable happens first. Silence turns louder. Opinions become sharper. And suddenly, everyone seems to have something to say about you. Machiavelli understood this reaction long before modern psychology tried to explain it. He saw it in courts, in politics, in men who rose too quickly, and in men who collapsed just as fast. Because when you stop seeking approval, you disturb an invisible system that most people live inside without even realizing it. Machiavelli wrote for those who want to control, not comfort. And control always begins with detachment from opinion. He warned that appearances rule the world, but he also showed that appearances are not truth. They are performance. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. That line is not just philosophy. It is a warning about human blindness. People judge quickly because they do not study deeply. They react emotionally because thinking takes effort. And so your image becomes more important to them than your reality. But here's where Machiavelli becomes dangerous to the average mind. He does not tell you to fix their perception. He tells you to master your reaction to it. Imagine this. You walk into a room and say less. You do not over-explain yourself. You do not rush to be understood. You do not chase validation in conversations. At first, people misinterpret it. They assume distance is arrogance. They assume silence is weakness. They assume calmness is insecurity. But Machiavelli would say, let them assume, because assumptions are not power. Observation is. And while they are busy judging your surface, you are building your foundation. He understood something most people miss completely. Reputation is not what you say about yourself. It is what survives other people's confusion about you. And confusion is unavoidable when you refuse to perform for approval. This is why Machiavelli never advised emotional transparency in competitive environments. Not because honesty is wrong, but because exposure without strategy becomes vulnerability. He believed that men reveal too much too soon, and then wonder why they lose influence later. In modern life, this looks like constantly explaining yourself to people who are not even part of your future. It looks like adjusting your decisions so you don't get criticized. It looks like delaying your progress because someone might misunderstand your direction. Machiavelli would call this slow self-sabotage, because every time you pause your actions for opinion, you are choosing perception over power, and perception never builds anything real. Think about how quickly people shift. One moment they admire you, the next moment they question you. One moment they follow you, the next moment they forget you. Machiavelli saw this pattern clearly and wrote about it through rulers and states. But the lesson applies everywhere. Human loyalty is unstable, not because people are evil, but because people are distracted by their own survival. That is why he said it is safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Because fear creates consistency where emotion does not. But even more important than fear or love is independence from both. The real lesson hidden inside Machiavelli's writing is not domination over others. It is liberation from dependence. When you stop caring what they think, you stop negotiating your identity in every interaction. You stop editing your personality for different audiences. You stop shrinking your truth so it fits comfortably inside someone else's expectation. And at first, this feels like isolation. But Machiavelli would argue it is actually alignment. Because for the first time, your actions stop being reactions. You begin to move with intention instead of approval. And intention is something most people never develop because they are too busy managing perception. There is another layer Machiavelli understood about judgment. People do not just judge you for who you are. They judge you for what they fear you might become. That is why early resistance often has nothing to do with your actions and everything to do with their insecurity. When you change, you force others to measure themselves differently. And not everyone is willing to do that. So they resist, they criticize, they label, they try to pull you back into the version of you they are comfortable with. Machiavelli would say this is normal. It is not a sign to stop. It is a sign that visibility has increased. And visibility always brings judgment. But judgment is not danger. Dependency is. Because the moment you start adjusting yourself to avoid criticism, you are no longer leading your life. You are managing other people's reactions to it. And that is how power is quietly lost. Not through failure, but through constant compromise. Machiavelli's brutal insight is simple. If you need everyone's approval, you will never move forward freely, because every step will require permission from people who are not walking your path. And so the true shift happens when you accept this. You will be misunderstood. You will be judged. You will be criticized. And still you continue, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity, because clarity is stronger than approval. And clarity does not argue. It executes. This is where the transformation begins. You stop asking for acceptance. You start observing outcomes. You stop reacting to opinions. You start measuring results. And slowly, something changes in how the world responds to you. Not because they understand you more, but because they begin to adjust to your consistency. Machiavelli never promised comfort. He promised awareness. And awareness is often uncomfortable at first because it removes illusions. But once illusions are gone, something powerful remains. Control over your direction, regardless of who agrees with it.